Father, for the beauty of the day, we give you thanks for the opportunity in the evening to reflect upon your intervention and your work in humanity through the judges, and specifically as we look at Deborah again this week. We're thankful for that. We're thankful for our church, and we pray, Father, that you would just bless us with opportunities to bear faithful witness to the resurrection of your Son. And it's through Jesus we pray. Amen. Okay, well, so last week we just kind of introduced the judgeship of Deborah. It's unique. One, she's the only female judge. Two, she's the only one who really judges than what we think about offering justice and ruling in that way and making decisions, and she's also a judge that's not called to be raised up like the warriors are in the rest of the book. So she's unique just in her, and the story of Deborah is unique because of all the players. So just to remind you of the players. There are the bad guys. King Yavin of Hatzor, whose name means he will understand, and then he's also the oppressor of Israel. He's the one that God raises up when Israel turns to idolatry. And then he has a commander. So Yavin has a commander of his army by the name of Sisera. Sisera is the agent of cruelty. He comes from a place known as the Forest of the Nations. One thing that's unique about Hatzor is Hatzor is one of the cities in the conquest that is offered up as a total whole burnt offering to God, so it's destroyed when Joshua comes in. So we have a rebuilding of Hatzor. But they also have chariots. They have a lot of chariots, 900 chariots, which is pretty unique because during the time period of the judges, the Philistines begin to gather up all the weapons of iron, so metal becomes a really precious commodity. Although obviously they have some, and they also have timber, if this is where Sisera is from, the Forest of the Nations, could be Lebanon area. And so you got a pretty formidable force that's oppressing Israel for 20 years. So I call those the bad guys. The good guys are Deborah, or Devorah, as she would be called. Her name literally means bee, like the buzzing creature, the stinging creature. But her name is, every Hebrew word comes from a three-letter root word, and her name comes from DVR, or Devar, which means word or speak or speaker. And so she is a prophetess, one who speaks for God, so it's a nice play on words. And then she's named in Judges 4 as the wife of Lepidot. Again, that's it could be her husband's name, but it also could mean that she's the torch lady, because Lepidot is about torches, and the wife can be translated woman or lady as well, which would make sense because what she does, she brings light and enlightenment to the people, and she kind of lights the way for her commander, Barak. Barak's name means lightning. Some think that Barak is actually Deborah's husband, which would make a little bit of literary sense if she's the torch lady and her husband is the lightning boy. So, makes for a good Disney movie, I guess. Although this is not Disney rated, what's going on in the book of Deborah. But he is the commander of Israel, and for him, when he's called to go to war, he will not go without Deborah. And Deborah then becomes the representation of God. She becomes the Ark of the Covenant, so to speak, for Israel. She's the theophany, or the presence of God for not only Barak, but for Israel when they go to war. So that's the good guys. So you got Yavin and Sisera on the bad guys team, and you got Deborah and Barak on the good guys team. And then you got two X factors in this whole story. One of them is named Yael. She is a Kenite, which is the family of Moses' wife, and her husband is Heber. Heber has an alliance with Yavin, the bad guy, but he's got ties to Israel through Moses. And I brought up a little bit last week, and I'll explain it some more this week, that she is a potential victim here who takes this really stressful situation with Sisera, and she becomes the clever warrior. She kind of turns the tables on victimization in the story. And she's the one who ultimately is going to get the glory for all this. And then the other X factor, of course, is God or Yahweh. Yahweh always administers justice filtered through grace. And after the 20 years of oppression, then the battle starts. And God intervenes in a very unique way, which we'll get into chapter 5. But 423, which also makes the story of Deborah unique, 423 said it is God who subdues the Canaanites, okay? Not the warrior, but God who gets that. So that's your lineup. Did you guys get maps? Yeah. So let me give you a map of kind of the area we're talking about, and what I want to do is just read chapter 5. So in the literary context of Deborah, the older manuscript of the work is chapter 5. So chapter 5 is the song or poetry, and then chapter 4 is the prose and kind of fills in the blanks and the details a little more. And I used to think it was the other way around, but Deborah, Porch Lady, enlightened me, so I'm enlightened. And so I want to, as I read through chapter 5, some of the places that are on this map will be in this, and some are not. And so if you got questions, just, hey, what about this, and where's this, and we'll go through it, and then I'll kind of at least show you some really interesting stuff out of chapter 5. So this is Deborah 5. Then Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, and this is NRSV, when locks are long in Israel, when the people offer themselves willingly, bless the Lord. I think some translations say when the leaders lead in Israel, and I forgot what others in verse 2. It's an interesting verse. Verse 3, hear, O kings, give ear, O princes, to the Lord I will sing. I will make melody to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled, and the heavens poured. The clouds indeed poured water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anat, in the days of Yael, caravans ceased and travelers kept to the byways. The peasantry prospered in Israel. They grew fat on plunder. Because you arose, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. When new gods were chosen, then war was in the gates. Was shield or spear to be seen among 40,000 in Israel? My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel, who offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless the Lord. Tell of it, you who ride on white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpets, and you who walk by the way. To the sound of musicians at the watering places, there they repeat the triumphs of the Lord, the triumphs of his peasantry in Israel. Then down to the gates march the people of the Lord. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, lead away your captives, O son of Abinoam. Then down marched the remnant of the noble. The people of the Lord marched down for him against the mighty. From Ephraim they set out into the valley. Let me do this right quick. So I'm about to get some geography. So you can kind of follow along. All right, from Ephraim they set out into the valley, following you, Benjamin, with your kin. From Machir they marched down the commanders, and from Zebulun those who bear the marshal's staff. The chiefs of Issachar came with Deborah, and Issachar, faithful to Barak. Into the valley they rushed at his heels. Among the clans of Reuben there was great searching of the heart. Why do you tarry among the sheepfolds to hear the piping for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben there was great searching of the heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why did he abide with the ships? Asher sat still at the coast of the sea, settling down by his landings. Zebulun is a people that scorn death. Naphtali too, on the height of the field. The kings came, they fought, then fought the kings of Canaan at Taanach by the waters of Megiddo. They got no spoils of silver. The stars fought from heaven, from their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent Kishon swept them away. The onrushing torrent, the torrent Kishon, march on, my soul, with might. Then loud beat the horse's hoofs with galloping of his steed. Curse Meroz, says the angel of the Lord. Curse bitterly its inhabitants, because they did not come to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. Most blessed of women be Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, of tent-dwelling women most blessed. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. She brought him curds in a lordly bowl. She put her hand to the tent peg, and her right hand to the workman's mallet. She struck Sisera a blow. She crushed his head. She shattered and pierced his temple. He sank, he fell. He lay still at her feet. At her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, there he fell dead. Out of the window she peered. The mother of Sisera gazed through the lattice. Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the hoofbeats of his chariot? Wisest ladies make answer. Indeed, she answers the question herself. Are they not finding and dividing spoil? A girl or two for every man. Spoil of dyed stuff for Sisera. Spoil of dyed stuffs embroidered. 2 pieces of dyed work embroidered from my neck as spoil. So perish all your enemies, O Lord, but your friends be like the sun as it rises in its might. That's a pretty cool song. Right? It's got some nice imagery in it. It's got some gruesome imagery in it. And it's got some Hebrew idioms in it that I think help explain what all's going on. So, if you kind of followed along, and if we worked through chapter 4 a little bit last week, when Israel is called to war, kind of in the middle of that map that I gave you, they meet at a place known as Tabor. I think that's where they gather. And then from there, they head westward. This is where the battle's going to take place in that valley, which on that map is the Jezreel Valley. Sometimes that place is called the Plains of Esdraelon. Sometimes it's called the Plains of Megiddo. So in the Old Testament, it's got different names. So I'm not exactly sure where they go when they go westward, but I do know this. So if you see the Kishon Wadi or the Kishon Creek that runs through there, or the Kishon River, which starts at Mount Carmel and runs all the way through the valley, that is what is mentioned in the song. So they get toward that area. So keep in mind. So you see at the kind of the top left of the map, to the right of where Mount Carmel is, that place, Haroshet Hagoyim or Goyim. That's where Sisera is from. Okay, that's his home. And then Hatzor would be probably north of that, a little northeast of that, where the palace may be or the kingdom's from. So there's a battle. Now, what's interesting about the battle is Israel has no weapons. So if you look in verse, let me see if I can find it, in chapter 5, verse 8, when the new gods were chosen, so that's when they turned to idolatry, then war was in the gates. It ensues, there's oppression, liberation comes. And then the question asked, was shield or spear to be seen among the 40,000 in Israel? So that's one of our clues that they don't have weapons of iron. They got clubs, right? Maybe a plowshare, maybe like Shamgar and Ox Goad. They don't have swords. Oh, here you go, Mark. Sorry. So those have been taken away. So they're basically a disarmed people. What's interesting is they go to battle against an army with chariots and horses that apparently have iron and wood, and they got not much, right? They got some grit, and they got this woman named Deborah who goes out before them as the image of God, right? Or the presence of God. And they got a leader of the army, Barak, who has bought in. And so as the poem opens up and begins to talk about, what happens, and chapter 4 again fills in some of the blanks. As Israel gets oppressed, Deborah's there. This Mother of Israel title, I think, is an official title, and I do believe that she does represent the presence of God. Later, right, God will be, and the prophets will be identified as a Mother of Israel herself. So it's her relationship with the people is special, and it's endearing. So in chapter 5, as the story unfolds, you get some people who join up. You get Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim. You get Benjamin. You get Zebulun. You get Machir, which is western Manasseh, which is on the western side of the Jordan. And you get Naphtali, which is Barak's tribe. So those are the people who join the fight. And they're commended in the poem for joining. And then you get people who didn't help. You get Reuben, who had to think about it. So Reuben formed a committee, and the committee decided they didn't have enough data, and they're going to wait until till the next wave of data comes out from the official from the Gallup poll, or whoever they're taking their data from, and then they'll make the decision. Well, if you've ever seen the movie Top Gun, when Maverick has to get up and go join the fight, and he said he'll be there in 60 seconds, and that commander said it's going to be over in 30. Hey, Reuben, you don't have time to form a committee about this. You can't kick this one down the road. Are you in? Are you out? I'm saying Reuben's out. They didn't have enough data. East Manasseh or Gilead is out. Dan is out. Asher's out. Then you get the special praise for those who are willing to fight to the death, which is Zebulun and Naphtali. This all comes from the song. So they go out to this plain and they fight. So let me tell you a little bit about the Jezreel Valley, or the plains of Esdraelon, or the plains of Megiddo. This is an important piece of property in Israel's history. It becomes super metaphoric as well as it is literal, because it's this place where Sisera and Deborah beat an army they never should beat. It's this place when Elijah goes up to Mount Carmel and makes fun of the gods of Canaan and Baal, that they chase the prophets of Baal down into this valley, and that's where they win. It's on this valley where King Saul and Jonathan are killed by the Philistines, and opens the pathway for David to become king. And it's this little valley that is mentioned in the book of Revelation, which is called Har, which is hill, Megiddon, right? The hill of Megiddo. Now, when when you read it, it's very figurative in Revelation. Although the place is real, it stands for something. That is, it's a place of God's decisiveness. And usually when God decides, things work out. Right? Even with the death of Saul, which remember that David is anointed, but he won't take over until Saul's dead. And he's not going to take Saul out. He's going to let God do that. So it's a really special place in the history of Israel. So what happens then that we get from chapter 5 is God says, well, it looks like it's almost a fair fight now. You got a bunch of Israelites with sticks and rocks, and you got a bunch of people from Hatzor with chariots and horses and weapons. Yeah, you know what? Just to even it out, let's make it rain. Let's just see how they bring. The question is does Sisera bring his umbrella? Apparently not. So God floods the Wadi Kishon or the River Kishon or whatever it is. I don't know the difference. It's a stream that has water in it, right? I'm going to guess it doesn't flood very often. And I'm going to guess when Sisera's army goes out and Barak draws them out to this battlefield, there's not a cloud in the sky. That's just me reading between the lines a little bit. So what happens, you people who are chariot drivers, what happens to your chariot when the rivers that you're fighting around begin to flood? Yeah. They lock up, right? If they're metal, they lock up and they get stuck. Well, now it's a little bit more of a fair fight, right? You got guys with sticks, whacking on people who are stuck in their chariots. Apparently they couldn't get their seatbelts undone. Or whatever God does to make that happen. So God floods the area. I would say it's very unlikely that happens. They're not prepared for it. Israel wins, mostly, on that battlefield. And so Sisera runs away because, if you're the commander and you get caught, can I just tell you that hand-to-hand combat is brutal? It's brutal. And when you were the commander and you got caught, you remember what happens with Saul on this valley when they catch him, right? They chop his head off and parade it around. It's brutal. Yeah. Sisera knows that. If I get caught, this is not going to be pretty. And it's not even going to be a clean cut because they don't have a good knife. It's going to be rough. And so he runs, and so I don't know exactly where Heber and Yael and the Kenites are set up. They are nomadic people. They're tent people, and they're moving along the valley, probably looking for food for their animals and water for their animals. But there is a relationship that Heber has with Yavin, and which would mean that Sisera has one. So he goes into the tent camp. Now, in the ancient Near Eastern world, so any guys, some of you guys have been to maybe the Middle East or to Africa. So when I started going to Africa, which was back in 2001, when I would go to congregations and teach and preach, the women sat on one side of the church, the men sat on the other. So in the ancient Near East, in the camp, Heber had the boys' side, right? So when you know how it is when we go, we've done treks before here, and I did treks when I was in. We had the girls' side of camp and the guys' side of the camp, right? And never shall they meet, so to speak. Then you have the neutral zone. So in that nomadic tribe, that would have been set up that way. Hebrews and the boys got their tent. Yael and the girls got their tent. And Sisera does something that is out of custom to begin with. So hospitality is a big thing in the ancient Near East, no matter where you're from. If you're an Israelite or a Canaanite, hospitality is important. It's a cultural thing. He breaks protocol. Why? Anybody know? Yeah, he goes to her tent, right? Where should he have gone? Heber's tent, right? Hey, bud, I know you got a little something. You and my boss, the king Yavin, y'all got a little side hustle going on. How about helping a brother out? Right? That's what he should have done. Goes to her tent. So not only is this a social faux pas, I think there's something more to that, and that's based on what his mother says in the poem. That little phrase, 2 girls for every man. You know what? One of the things that you got to do when you plundered a place, if you're a male soldier, what do you get to do? You rape and pillage, right? She looks nice. I think I'll take her. And I would have to say that Yael knows that. And the fact that Sisera does not go to her husband, it comes to her tent, there are flags flying already. Hey, you got a reputation, boy. Right. Your mama knows about it. Not only that, apparently what he would do, or they would do, they would take the best clothes off the women, and he would give it to mama. Cool scarves, embroidered stuff, right? Nice dresses, probably good shoes. Prada. Good stuff, right? It's the good stuff. And listen, I think Yael, there's trouble brewing here, right? I don't think Yael's got a dog in the hunt. For God, against God, for Israel, against Yavin. She's in trouble. So he breaks protocol 1 by going to her tent. He does something else that's really unusual, too, in breaking protocol. He asks for something. Can you imagine? So, hey, Greg, Mark, welcome to my house. Glad you came. Greg, would you go fix me some French toast? I'm just really hungry for French toast. I think that to be a little odd, right? In ancient Near Eastern hospitality, if you're the guest, you don't ask. The host offers. He asks, how about some water? All right? That's another red flag. Yeah. So why not ask for the milk? Because apparently the milk's got some kind of magic elixir in it, right? Takes the edge off. Give me some water because I need to. I've been running for a while, right? I need my strength. I can't pillage much if I'm dehydrated, right? So that's red flag number 2. Red flag number 3 is he says, this is. Remember I told you that Judges has some really weird humor in it. This is a weird humor. He says, if somebody asks if a man is here, say no. Kind of get the fun in that, right? Yeah, there's no man here. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, he is. He is trying to, right? And I think he is pressing himself on her. And I think she is thinking, you know what? I'm about to be sexually assaulted here. Yeah. Yeah, and whether she even knows that or not, I mean, I suspect maybe they know about the oppression. I mean, it's been 20 years, right? It's been going on for a while. He's got to be a little haggard looking, right? Running from the battlefield to their place. But he just throws a bunch of red flags up. And so Yael's got to protect herself. This isn't situational ethics, right? Is she a double agent? I don't know. That's what I said before. Maybe she's a double agent. Maybe she's working both sides. But I think what she's doing, she's protecting herself. So she offers him the milk, probably seeing his fatigue. And there's some phraseology about being at your feet, falling at your feet. That has sexual connotation. And it deals with death or sex. I'll just say that in the Hebrew idiom. This was both, I think. I think there's a threat that's going on, and she takes him out. Rather violently, by the way. Pretty strong. And, this is probably not a metal tent peg. This is probably a wooden tent peg. and probably a wooden mallet to crush the skull and pierce the temples. She worked out a little bit. So sometimes Yael in certain circles gets a bit of a bad rap for being a murderer, or or for playing fast and loose with situational ethics. I think she's self-defense, and God praises her, by the way. The song, God alludes to the fact when Deborah tells Barak, if I have to go, you don't get the glory. Again, as I said last week, I'm really impressed with that. It's refreshing. He doesn't care who gets the glory, right? As long as the job gets done, he's a bit pragmatic about it. But Deborah's, I think, really talking about Yael eventually gets the glory, not her. It's not Deborah's glory. It's Yael. So she rescues herself from this would-be assailant. And then in the song, she's called the most blessed. She's the hero, right, of the story. She's the clever warrior. And so, I do think that this story does speak to the atrocities, the victimization of women. And women have to fight back sometime. And I think we have to be supportive of that as God's people. It's tough. That's a tough world, just like it is now. So anyway, that's the poem. Anything in the poem you want to look at specifically? And then I've got some things that I want to cover just about that I think for some things from Deborah that
why wasn't she afraid of Barak?
Who, Deborah?
No.
Yael? I don't know at what point, probably because Deborah's with him, if one. Yeah, because Deborah and Barak go together out to battle. So, and we don't know if when all this takes place and they make it to the tent, and but it's probably Deborah's presence that, and Barak doesn't have the reputation that Sisera has either. That he's known. He's well known for what he does when he conquers. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm just thinking it's interesting that people would call out Yael for situational ethics.
Right.
When it's really no different. Something that's a little closer to our times, the Jewish Holocaust, if they had attacked their the ones who imprisoned.
Right. No. So it's, I think when I think about people who really want to push that question, right, situational ethics, and lean a little bit into Bonhoeffer, because remember, Bonhoeffer's a pacifist, and he comes to America, and he's not going to get involved, and he just keeps hearing the atrocities, and then, right, he becomes and he's planning the assassination of Hitler, right, and he's executed for treason for that. So that's not situational ethics necessarily, right? There's that people try to lay on Bonhoeffer on her. Listen, there are real atrocities going on here, and sometimes they have to be dealt with. Listen, that's not fun. That's not an easy conversation to have. Now, wars are not an easy conversation for me to have. At all. And I'm not a pacifist. I'm saying I'm troubled by it, though, right? Because I would like to think that I believe that all life is holy and matters, and it's sanctified, and all are created in the image of God. And to take life it's hard. It's hard to justify, and I know there is justification. I think Yael's a great example of that. She's not doing this, by the way, to get a bronze statue of herself somewhere. She's doing it to protect herself. And I think in some ways protecting the reputation of her husbands, because if she gets sexually assaulted, she's damaged goods for him, right? It's a hard world. So, other thoughts on just on the poem itself, or questions you have, or the song that any of the imagery and.
It's interesting that Deborah is called the mother
Mm-hmm.
of Israel.
Yeah. Yeah. Different contrast, right? It is. So you've got one who is altruistic, who is community minded, if I will say, that seeks justice, seeks righteousness, and you got another one who just says, "Hey, where's my stuff? I don't care how you got it." Right? Well, I know how you got it. I don't care that you got it that way. My wardrobe's getting a little stale, son. Go to battle. Do some of that pillaging stuff that you do. Right? And what's taking you so long? You usually win, right? Well, remember the two X factors in the whole story is Yael and God. God intervenes. First, I think intervenes through Deborah. Second, then through the storm, right? Through the storm theophany, and then rallies some troops, right? She's my favorite judge. I mean, it's by far. There's so many layers to this story. I could spend weeks on it. So, I do want to speak a little bit about leadership and what's going on here, and maybe some liberation theology, and because Israel's being liberated from an oppressor, and Yael liberates herself from an oppressor, and God liberates the folks from the oppressors that God raised up, which is interesting. But there's something about leaders. So in that poem or that song in verse 2, when it says, "When the locks are long in Israel," and some translations say, "When the leaders lead in Israel." Is that right? Is that what's that? What do you have? Is that NIV? ESV has that, right? So that's a weird idiom, right? When the locks are long. What that means, what I think is, especially if you think about a woman, it takes a while to grow your hair out, right, Leslie? Yeah. So, and you earned those hairs, right? It takes a while. You earned them, and so part of what that is speaks to maturity, right? People who've been at it for a while, they're not novices. This isn't, by the way, Deborah is not Samson, who just says, "Oh, look, I'm strong. Let's go play." Right? Which we'll get to him later, but still, I'm a marvel. He's in the Heroes of the Faith, in Hebrews 11. I don't get it, but anyway, I'm still wrestling with it. So she's earned her spot, right? She's mature and she's wise. And one of the things about leaders leading, and I think what Deborah does, is intentionality. What she does is intentional. Barak, I will go with you. I will be God, the representation of God for you. But know this, right? When I go. And so there's an intentionality about her this is not reactionary, right? It's thought out. And so one of the things that in leadership that I really struggle with is is knowing the difference of being proactive and reactive. Listen, I know there's times you have to just react. We could not have foreseen losing 3/4 of our usable space. So, but there were some proactive things already in place so that when we lost our space, you know what? These things kept going on, right? This was already happening, right? Small groups, smaller places, easy to move, easy to adjust times. So we had a proactive, intentional thought about, hey, how are we going to build each other up and go through some education? And in the meantime, we had something happen that we had to react to. But, Just think if we were doing traditional Sunday, Wednesday classes at the 2 times, what would we be doing now? We'd be scrambling like crazy, right? All we did was say, hey, give us a month, and we'll get back to you. Here we are, right? And so there was some intentionality about establishing these things to begin with. Right? This was not just a reaction to COVID, how we got started. This was an intentional thought. How do we teach transformatively? How do we foster relationships? How do we get in the format where we can ask good questions? There was yes, ma'am.
So, following along your line of thought, this was all intentional, that you had this plan for how this was going, and you're saying Deborah had this plan. Do you think that the ones that didn't show up weren't down with the plan?
Yeah, or not down with her. Yeah.
That's what I was.
Yeah. So now remember, she's also a prophetess. She's called a prophetess. That is one who speaks for God, one who understands the will of God. Listen, she knows this thing is already won when she goes. I believe that. She knows it's won. Based on what her position as the spokesperson for God is, there's conversation, there's revelation that's happening. Now, she may not know the how. She just knows the end. And so even her decision to go and to call Barak and to say, call the troops, there's some intentionality about it. I mean, it's been 20 years, right, of the oppression. What's the tipping point? Why now? I would say she got a revelation. This is the right time. Let's go. Yes, sir.
President, King, they are commander-in-chief. Their main duty is to protect the country.
Right.
Do you see a judge the same way?
Yeah, so judges aren't quite the same, I don't think, Ed, because they're typically raised up to repel that which has already been invaded. And so they're not setting up organized. So remember one of the questions I asked at the beginning of Judges is, does autonomy work? Can you have a loose coalition of tribes and really set a border and a boundary and protect land? Well, the answer is no, right? Unless you trust God and stay with God. I mean, that would be the answer, that the theocracy. So I think they're kind of playing this thing nilly-willy, right? And just, oh, well, we were oppressed. We'll cry out. And I mean, it's happened so often and so repeatedly in different places in Israel. I don't know that they're organized in that way. Plus, it seems like they're weaponless for the most part. So they have to depend on God. Right. From different places, right? I mean, the majority of the history of Israel is a life of oppression. Whether that's Egypt, or in the Judges, or the Assyrians, or the Babylonians, or the Medo-Persians, or the Romans. I mean, or Nazi Germany. I mean, it's just there, right? So in leading, there's intentionality. I think also what Deborah does is Deborah is trustworthy herself, but Deborah has a unique skill that a lot of leaders don't. She trusts others. I mean, that's a hard thing for me, right? I like you, and I know you got talent, but are you really going to do that? Yeah. You're going to do that to my satisfaction? Yeah. I'm going to check on you. All right. And so that is a big deal. That's a big deal for me as a preacher. If my eldership doesn't trust me, I'm no good to them. And if I don't trust them, right, I'm no good to them. And what that means, then I have to offer the same trust that I've been given, right? So Deborah seems to have that. Okay, go. I'll go with you.
A couple things in the chapter that stood out to me. Deborah, who we think is going to be the hero at the beginning of the chapter, doesn't turn out to be the ultimate hero of the story. But the chapter subtitle is Deborah.
Yeah. And the other really, I think, incredible character in this is Barak. Because at first blush, you read Barak and you go, hey, what's wrong with you? Right? Where's your machismo, bud? Right? But he has such a trust in Deborah's relationship with God and in Deborah that he's okay. Right? I am really okay with you going along. Matter of fact, I insist. To the point, if you don't go, I'm not going. That's not cowardice. I think that is being discerning, right? And trusting. And he's okay with not getting credit. It does, doesn't it? My first time I ever taught this, I just ripped on him. Right? I was just a knuckleheaded kid teaching this, like I said, like a junior high boy, right? And now I go, wow, that guy's pretty incredible.
I was just reading that in chapter 4 when Barak said there, if you will go with me, I will go, but if you will not go with me, I will not go. And she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory. So the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman, right? And if you don't know the outcome and you're in that situation and you're Barak, you're thinking, okay, you're going to get the glory. I mean, because she's the only woman in the picture here. So it's like, he might easily think, wow, she's pretty proud too, because she thinks she's going to get all the glory. Glory wasn't for her, it wasn't for Barak. It was in the hand of someone that was an outlier.
An outlier, that's right.
That's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. Another thing that Deborah does well, she just communicates well. Right? Well communicated expectations, right? Isn't that right? If we have those, isn't life if they're well communicated? These nebulous things, love God and love neighbor, what's that mean, right? Now, that's the Gospels are what teach us to, how to communicate that. But we just say that, we throw that out. Well, what's that mean? Right? She's a good communicator. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. That's right. When they're oppressing you. So I think there's a good thing about leadership in here. I think there's also something about ministry here that really struck me. Is one, I think ministry, just the essence of ministry, is counterintuitive. That is, it's not how we're typically wired. To serve others, to do it a different way, to think differently, to see things through a different lens. We are so bound by our own experience and culture and teaching that it's hard for us to see outside that. And this is a counterintuitive story, isn't it? This is not some macho dude with long, pretty hair who's really strong. It's counterintuitive. What kind of warrior is Deborah? Apparently a pretty good one, right? And so there is something, I think there's something that's very counterintuitive about doing ministry in areas that you don't think about, right? Or in ways that you don't think about. And I think you've seen that. You've seen the evolution of our outlook at this church over the years. From inward looking to trying to look outward in areas that we're involved in that we have not been, that we never thought about being involved in before. It is counterintuitive.
Looking at all this with my Lifeline training glasses on would be, why this story, why now, for Mark.
Yeah.
Think about it. Beth is trying to choose her path to what she thinks her future is. And she looks to us for guidance. But it's been a challenge as parents to say, you know what, this is your time. You need to be drawing close to God, and you need to be making those decisions. And we'll be your bumpers to borrow a bowling cart. We'll keep you in the lane, but you need to decide which way the lane's going. And I think that's what Barak does in a way, is say, this is the plan I had, but I'm going to trust your plan, and I'm going to be here to help you stay in the lane.
Yeah, I do think that speaks to the next thing I was thinking about with ministry. Part of what ministry is, remember what Paul said when in Ephesians when he goes through and he lists, some were this and some were this and some were this and some had this. What was it for? Right? It was to equip the saints for ministry. Right? And part of ministry is empowering others to walk alongside you. Right? That's what Deborah does. Come, I'll go with you. Right?
That's the hard part about leadership.
Yeah.
Because, it's really fun to help people that I know can help me. It's a lot harder to help someone in a way that actually is beneficial for them. That's what ministry is.
Right. I think that's what Deborah does. She empowers Israel to go to war with nothing. Right? They shouldn't have won. Nothing but God, right? And there's just something empowering about that. And I think in whatever ministry is, whether you're leading the ministry or have joined a ministry, to empower others to join you, that's the key, right? It's not programs, it's not structure, it's equipping.
Well, it's even God is going to work with the smallest of numbers because they do not have
Right.
a whole lot of support.
Yeah, and plus they didn't even get the full buy-in from the people that they could draw from, right? Yeah.
I mean, how many people did this take on the front of the world?
8. Right.
How many people did he use when he was starting his whole ministry on earth? 12.
Yeah, and you think about it, even if you read Luke Acts and you read Acts, even after the resurrection, you think about all those people, right, prior to Pentecost, there's 120 of them. All the people that Jesus encountered in those 3 years. 120 stuck around. Interesting, huh? But what does Jesus do with that 120 or that 12? There's an empowering that goes on. That's why he told them in the upper room, you'll do greater things than even I.
It's Matthew 13, right? The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. It's the smallest seed, and you throw it in the garden, it becomes the biggest plant. That's the presence of God will do that.
Mm-hmm. Another thing about ministry, and Deborah does well, is you got to manage disappointment. Look at all the people who didn't show up. Okay, she recognized. She didn't ignore them. She recognized, right? You didn't show up. There was a call made. You didn't answer the call. So one of the this is Greg's pet peeve. Okay, it's happened here. It's happened in other churches. So we need volunteers for something. So there's a general call. Hey, we need volunteers for this. Crickets chirping, baby. I get up and rant about it. Hey, nobody showed up. You didn't ask me. I did ask you. No, you didn't ask me. Right. Oh. Didn't know I had to. Now, that might be a Greg problem. I admit that. So what happens if I do ask you then and you don't show up? You got to manage that, right? I expect that. I'm certain Deborah expected that. Hey, the call goes out. We're going to go fight. It looks like we're going to lose, but we need you anyway. And, some said no, and some said, we'll think about it, and some showed up.
You think she said, hey, it looks like we're going to lose?
No, probably not. No, that's me talking.
AWS 64.
Yeah. So, but she does manage disappointments, right? She goes with what she has.
Yeah, and that's huge.
It is.
And I know that when something doesn't go the way I want, I just turn into just a real negative.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, listen, I can get the Elijah complex in a hurry. God, I'm the only one.
Isn't it interesting? When you want many, you know, God gives you few, and when you think you're the only one, God gives you many.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's humbling.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Wherever you're at.
It's humbling, right?
So another thing I've been thinking about in this chapter is, am I giving the girls what they need to defend themselves?
Yeah.
I mean, so it was a tent peg and a hammer that Hayel, however you say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for all of the troubles and discriminations or injustices or whatever battle they encounter, are they equipped to handle themselves?
That's why empowering and equipping is so important. Listen, I'm with old Matthew McConaughey. Listen, life ain't fair, and if somebody told you it was, they lied. It's not, right? It's not. There are people with power that want to redefine power and going to keep power. And there are people who don't like you because of what you believe. And there are people who will abuse you even when you try to resist.
Even when your entire people are oppressed, you can be singled out.
You can be. So,
That's part of what Deborah, the beauty of what she did with the call, she, knowing the stakes, and there would be few perhaps that answer the call, she knew the outcome because she knows the Lord. We know
Right.
the outcome no matter what our kiddos are coming up against, and so her faith is greater in all of it. And she trekked on anyways. So there was 10 that showed up for however many.
Right.
And so, when things come our way, we just keep on going, whether no one's there next to us or not.
yeah, early when I did youth ministry, and so we had some event, right? And one kid showed up, and I canceled it. I was wrong. You know what? Me and that one kid should have had fun. So a wise person said, Greg, don't do that again. Not in a chastising way, but you missed an opportunity to connect. So the next time I had it, and that same kid is the only one that showed up, it was glorious. Right?
Lisa's thriving in the environment where it's one-on-one.
Right. Yeah. So that's why in these groups, people say, how many are showing up? I don't care. Right? As far as just the numbers. Listen, if it's you and me, and God's here, it's good. And if it's 6 of us, then great. And if it's 16, great. I'm not keeping score. Right? I'm not keeping score. What I'm doing is trying to fill your cup and you fill mine. And God's filling all of our cups, right? So it's good. That's what I quit taking attendance a long time ago. Numbers on paper. What's going on in here and in here? That's what. I think Deborah gets that too. That's part of joining God's mission, right? You join with who God sets you up with. And if you empower and others join, great. And if it's a small group and God, great. And if it's a whole nation, even better. So.
When you participate, like you reap what you sow, right?
Right.
When you participate, you get the benefit that comes from participating. When you stand on the side and contemplate too long, guess what? You miss the opportunity to watch God flood the water, like flood the area.
Yeah, by the way, you want to stop chirping in a church, get people busy. Give them something to do. Chirping stops. Yeah. Let God flood a building. Chirping stops. Yeah. I could teach for weeks on this. She's such a great study. So, yeah.
My favorite.
Yeah, she's my favorite of the judges. So,